Well, thank you, Chris, for the introduction. No pressure, certainly, following presidents. Yeah. I hope all of you are well fed and a little drunk. I don't think I've ever spoken this late in the evening, so the staff was very kind. They gave me a cup of coffee, which I'll be drinking from time to time. The topic of my talk is photorealistic telepresence. I'd like to start by saying, humans, by their nature, are social animals. But I don't really need to say that here, because we're all in this room together. You all understand the importance of social interactions. It's what you've experienced over the last couple of days. And when you see a scene like this one that you see, you just experienced it right before this in the social that you had. It's incredible how much we extract from one another, how much information we absorb just by being in the presence of one another, and how much we project as well. If you just look at this, it's instantly recognizable. You know that there is this lady wearing black in the background. You're all able to identify that she's not part of the social group. There's a slight silhouette of a woman behind the man in the burgundy shirt. And just from the slight silhouette, you extract the fact that there is someone. In your mind's eye, you can recognize there's some hum in the background. We extract a lot of information just from this one snapshot. And it's an experience all of us experience at every social gathering that we have. There's a raft of research that tells us that our happiness, our productivity, even our health is dependent on the quality and quantity of social connections we have in our life. But the biggest obstacle to this social connection has always been distance. Our ability to project and absorb this information is perhaps at the level of meters. When people leave an area, when all of you fly back out of Pittsburgh, the ability for you to connect to one another reduces drastically. And throughout history, we've been looking at ways in which we can improve and further the connections we can have with people no matter where they are. This started, of course, with the simple postal service centuries ago. But this was asynchronous. It would take months, maybe years for messages to come across, but it was such a powerful means that people set networks all over the world just to get these tidbits of information to people they cared about. The big sort of breakthrough was when we could have real-time communication across long distances with the invention of the telegraph. And this was a revolution that's sometimes not well understood. How fundamentally it changed not just lives, but things like warfare, finance, education, world government. All of these things were profoundly changed with the invention of the telegraph. Followed up quickly with the telephone. Causation doesn't mean correlation, but there were big changes in the world right after the invention of the telegraph, with the Civil War here in the US. Right after the invention of the telephone, there were massive changes in the way the world organized itself. The world wars happened soon after as well. And finally, with the televideo in the 1920s. Each of these technologies is actually still here with us today, in the form of messaging, audio calling, and of course video calling as well. But there's a fundamental limitation with these technologies, even as they are today. This is a video call I had with Mary recently, and the very basic fundamental of social interaction, which is to make eye contact with somebody else, to sort of like be in their presence. This is something which we cannot experience with video calling, even with video calling today. This is something all of us know and have experienced firsthand. And when you see there are more people in the scene, you can look on the top left. Michael is looking out of the window, it seems, or is he looking at a second screen? It's hard to tell whether he's engaged or not. Is Salim in the bottom left? Is he listening to what I'm saying, or is he playing Minecraft with his friends? It's hard to tell. And this was a screenshot I took from a meeting recently. And it feels different, right? There's such a big difference between what you experience at the tables you are at today, right? There's a reason why these are all circular, where you can face everyone else. And a meeting like this one. What is the level of engagement that you feel? What is the connection that you feel? It's very different from what we know when you look at a scene like this one. Like you can imagine walking up to this group of people, them turning around and looking at you, acknowledging that you're there, smiling, you're becoming part of that group. That's such a fundamental, almost a biological experience that we all have when we want to connect with one another. And that does not exist for us when people leave the proximity with it. So there is a change, technological change that's been happening over the past 5 or 10 years that provides an opportunity to go beyond what we have with video calling today. And that's the rise of 3D displays. Of course, I refer to virtual reality and mixed reality headsets, augmented reality or wearables, but also spatial audio. This is sometimes less understood or not included as much within these three, but these three 3D displays offer the opportunity to do something more than what we can with video calling. The challenge is to enable authentic communication in artificial reality. And this statement contains the challenge that we have in this area. To the two words, authentic and artificial. Authenticity is the opposite of artificiality. And somehow we have to figure out how to enable, how to fool one of the most perceptive systems in existence. Humans looking at other people that they know and they care about. We have to somehow fool that system to allow it to allow us to have authentic experiences with one another. If you look at the offerings today, most of the social VR applications and social AR applications look something like this. They're stylized in some sort of a way, and if you haven't tried them, they're a whole lot of fun. It's very engaging, you can have lots of experiences, but it doesn't quite approximate what all of you are experiencing today or what you experience when you meet someone you care about or someone you care to have a meaningful conversation with in person. This is an example of that. This is actually a render of one of our avatars. And I'd like to show this example because this is actually an error. You lose actually what she was doing. This is the real image. This is the render. And even though the difference is small, there's a very different sort of emotion that's evoked for me. I know Danny, when I see this. To me, this is an expression that suggests an interest, an openness. It's a slight difference from this one, which seems less interested, less involved. My reaction might be slightly different to what she does. I might be a little bit more forward, I might be a little bit more open. And then her reaction would change based on that. Mine would change as well. These small sorts of changes affect how much we can connect with people, and how deeply we engage with them. So, many years ago, Marvin Minsky suggested the term telepresence to denote the ability to project your presence more from the perspective of manipulation, but it has come to also encompass the social interactions as well over the past few years. And this has been an area of research for decades. And perhaps the first, including at Carnegie Mellon in the 1990s, with the virtualized reality program. But the real sort of breakthrough in this area took place in 2016 with the holoportation program from Microsoft. This was Sharan Azadi and his group at Microsoft demonstrated that you could actually have interactions with people remotely and in real time. This required them to instrument the room with about 24 cameras, but you could have it live and you could experience being in a space with another person. And most recently, Apple released Personas, which is another exciting step towards this. This was only heads and hands, but it allowed you to experience being in a space as a commercial product, and this is a very big step as well. So the goal here is what I would call metric telepresence. The goal is to enable remote interactions that are indistinguishable from in-person interactions. So no matter where the person you care to interact with lives in the world, you can have an experience with them just as if they were there with you. Here's a demo that we did last year. This is a call between Lex Friedman and Mark Zuckerberg, and I'll play this for you to see where the tech is.
This is so great. Lighting change? Wow.
Yeah, if you put the light anywhere.
And it doesn't feel awkward to to be really close to you.
No, it does. I actually moved you back. You were like right here.
I don't know if people can see this, but this is incredible. The realism here is just incredible. Where am I? Where are you, Mark? Where are we?
You're in Austin, right?
No, I mean this place. we're surrounded by darkness with ultra realistic face, and it just feels like we're in the same room. This is really the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And sorry to be in your personal space.
I mean,
we have done jiu-jitsu before.
Yeah, no, I was commenting to the team before that even that I feel like we've choked each other from further distances than it feels like we are right now.
I mean, this is just really incredible. I don't know how to describe it with words. It really feels like we're in the same room.
Yeah.
It feels like the future.
There was a term that Lex kept on coming back to again and again during the interview. And the word was intimate. He said that this feels intimate. And I mean, that struck me because when was the last time you were in a VC call with someone and thought, wow, this seems intimate. It doesn't feel that way, right? It just doesn't. So I'm going to spend a bit of time trying to lay out what the challenges are and how we're approaching this particular space. And as an analogy, I'd like to start with audio calling. Right? The problem of audio calling is you have two people at two different sites, say Pittsburgh and Menlo Park. And what we've done is we've invented a device called a microphone. We've invented another device called a speaker. And we simply transmit the audio from the microphone to the speaker. And we've designed the microphone to pick up human sounds. We've designed the speaker to produce what the microphone can pick up. And the goal over here is to reproduce at the receiver side precisely what the transmitter produces, right? The sensor in this case matches the display. And this works very well because that's what you want. You want to hear what the other person said. Now, with the rise of digital networks, the concept of an encoder arose, right? You take the signal from the microphone, you digitize it, you encode it, in other words, compress it into an audio code, you send it to the remote side, you decode it, and that's what you produce at the speaker. And the purpose of designing this encoder and decoder is to minimize distortion. You explicitly design them so that you can reproduce at the speaker's end what was produced at the transmitter's end, but try to minimize one other quantity. And that quantity is latency. So you want to reduce the time it takes to encode, transmit by means of compression, and then decoding. These two terms, the distortion and the latency, is what we've designed the sensors for, the display for, the decoder and the encoders for as well. This is what audio codecs are. When we think about video coding, it's exactly the same thing. We've designed cameras to sense what the person is doing and displays to show what the camera produces as well. So in addition to audio, now there's a video channel, there's a video encoder and decoder, and then you have a display as well. And once again, the sensor matches the display. What the microphone, what the speaker sounds out, what the display shows is exactly what the microphone and the cameras pick up. Now when we think about 3D displays, there is a new challenge that arises. This challenge is that for the first time, what the transmitter does changes what the receiver does changes what they see and they hear. So as Anuj over here was walking around Autumn, he chose what side of her to see. He moved around her, and this changes what he actually saw. And similarly, it changes what he actually heard as well for the first time. And now the question is, if this is what the display is, you should be able to see anyone from any direction, you should be able to hear them from any direction. What sensor can you design that will be able to do that? Right? What sensor can you design that matches the display? You'd have to create a sensor that can see Autumn from every single viewpoint. Any viewpoint at all. And of course the problem is this is, first of all, physically prohibitive, but second, it's also physically impossible, because you'd have to have camera views that are close and far away, and they would include one another. Microphones would also cause distortions of that sort. So it's not possible to do it. And the question is, in this particular case, the sensor cannot match the display. And this is why this problem is different in its nature and requires a deeper understanding of the person and what they're trying to do from a limited set of inputs. On our headsets, this is the Quest Pro. These are the views that you can see of a person's face. You can see the sort of oblique view of the eye, an oblique view of the mouth, occluded by this person's mustache, a bit of the forehead, and from this jigsaw puzzle, you have to infer what was the person doing precisely. So here's a little bit of an exercise. I'm going to play a video. These are the views that the system sees of the person. You can see the eyes, the mouth, and then on the top two views, these are downward-facing cameras looking at the person's hand. In your own mind's eye, try to infer what the person is doing, and in particular, think about the person's knees and shoulders, and you'll see why in a second. Probably you got some sort of a picture, not a very good one. And this is, again, all of us with years of experience looking at people, knowing how people behave. It's still something of a challenge, right? So now I'll play the video again so you can see what he was actually doing. The information is there, but it's very, very slight. It's very subtle in there. And the challenge we want to set our system is to be able to infer what people are doing from this kind of input. And that necessitates some sort of understanding of humans. How they move, how they behave, how they look, that kind of an understanding, we need to imbue machines to be able to extract that from this system. So in this case, what is a codec avatar? A codec avatar is what we define as a way to address this problem. Just like we have with audio codecs and video codecs, a codec avatar is also a pair of functions. An encoder, which takes the sensor data, the data I told you just now, and converts it into a code that encodes what state the person is in. What their facial expressions are, what their hand movements are, what their body movement is, precisely trying to recover what the person is actually doing. And then there is a decoder function that takes this input, takes the state of the person, interprets it, and produces the view, the left eye, the right ear, the left ear, audio for the person. But the change in this case is that what the receiver does, where they're looking at the person from, how they're moving, affects what they see as well. So this also comes in as an input to the decoder. In addition to that, if there are two people in two different locations, I'm in my office, you're at your home, either I'm in your space, you're in my space, or we're both in some other space. So we have to be able to disentangle the environment as well. We should be able to place any person in any view and see them from any direction. So as a definition, a pair of functions, an encoder and decoder, that can disentangle the transmitter's behavior, the receiver's behavior, and the environment signals to minimize distortion and latency. And this is key. It's not accidental that our phones minimize distortion and latency, or that our video cameras and video calling does. It's because we are communicating with one another. We want to make sure that the information we send in the tone of our voices, in terms of the content of what we say, is preserved as much as possible. And trust is the medium of communication. I have to trust that what my mother said is exactly what I'm hearing. If I suspect that there's distortion, if I suspect that there is change, I'm much less likely to use it. And that remains even more true when you're in the presence of another person fully in 3 dimensions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the decoder first. What does the design look like? How do we design a decoder like this? And of course, with learning systems, you have to start with data. This is a system called Mugsy. It's a dome with 170 high-resolution, high-frame-rate cameras, 11 megapixels that capture at 90 frames per second. And this is, in essence, you should think of it as a machine that can disentangle transmitter, environment, and receiver behavior. In what sense? Since it's a video camera, it records movement and behavior. Since there are so many of these cameras, it's like saying you're sampling every particular direction that you can view, the receiver can view the transmitter from. And the fact that there are controllable lights in this, you can flash them like a light stage, that is like a design manifestation of being able to control the environment. So this is what the views look like from every direction of capture. And if you zoom in, you can see what he had for lunch as well. From these, you can then train learning systems that can disentangle the expression of the transmitter, the view of the receiver, and the environment itself as well. So this is an example of decoding the geometry, the texture, and here we'll just change the expression while keeping the view and the environment fixed. Next, we can change the environment and the expression disjointly. So you can see the lighting changes. And then finally, we can change all three of them simultaneously. The viewing direction, the expression, and the environment. And what this lets you do is programmatically change these things and let the system learn how to do it in the most realistic way possible to make it efficient. So let's look at the encoder now. The encoder is what takes input from the signal, from the sensors, and produces an inference of what the code or the state of the person is. And this is an example of a result that we were able to produce. We're swiping between the raw image signal and what the renders of the person look like. And you can see there is precision over here. The goal, once again, is to try to minimize distortion, to try to reproduce precisely what the person did. And when you put these together, you see the sensors from the headset go into a code, which then produce the output which the person sees enter. And here is a result that we produced now about 6 years ago. I'll play this with you.
Well, what can your face do? Can you show us?
Well, I've always hoped you would ask me that question. So I have some pretty good, I think, mouth movement.
How about your eyes? Can you look left, right, up, down? Good.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Ah, ooh. I think one of my favorites is puffing my cheeks.
The mouthwash commercial.
And roll like my tongue.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So this one was actually quite compelling, but one of the big challenges were that it didn't capture hair very well. This is what it looks like for one of our colleagues, Colin. And what we really needed was something that could capture much more of the detail and actually look and feel like hair as it looks and as it moves as well. And this led us to develop more volumetric methods of rendering. And this is what we call codec avatars 2.0. We started with a mesh, and then we built something called neural volumes. This is kind of like a precursor to NERF. And we said that we take these neural volumes and make primitives out of them, and try to capture the appearance of the person using this. And this allowed us for the very first time to capture hair, capture actually a lot of detail on the face, eyelashes, teeth, eye glands, those sorts of things. And this was an example of the result. So you put these in, and they break out into these individual neural elements that we can then capture this sort of detail. And this led to another level of realism. Now, play this for you.
Typical expressions that you might see people do. For example, I can smile. Well, force smile. I can do I can be angry, surprised, fearful, wink, act impressed.
Yeah, interesting.
There's a slight level of detail that's higher in this one than the last one. But with this slight level of detail, suddenly there's a feeling of emotion that emerged. This was the first system. I know Jason for a long time. I felt when I was talking to him, I actually suspended disbelief and felt like I was actually there talking to him. Eye contact was there. It really felt for the first time that we could do it. Now, the next step was how do we get this to change in any environment as well? So the system actually has lights that are controllable. So you can not just see the person from any view, you can illuminate them from any direction as well. And this led to the ability to do what you saw in the Lex MZ interview, that we could change the direction of illumination as well. And it's really like, it's hard to see over here, but if you get close to someone with hair, you can even see like the capillary action of light on hair, like it moves up the strand. Even that's captured inside of these systems as well. There is still like two limitations. One is that there is a level of detail that's missing. Nonetheless, you can see this in the mouth, you can see it in the glints of the eye, and you can see it especially in the skin in this direction. You can see that there's quite a bit of detail that's missed. And while this might seem like subtle differences for this person who you don't know, if it is there for people that you know, it is something you do notice. It is something that does distract them. And then if you looked at it, individual hair strands as well, or not captured precisely. The second is, to do these sorts of demos, it required 4 high-end GPUs. Now that's okay for demos, but if we really wanted to get this out for consumers to use, that's way too much competition. We need to improve efficiency as well. Fortunately, over the last couple of years, as most of you probably heard, there was a breakthrough in rendering called Gaussian splats. And we used this technology that allowed us to both reduce the distortion and improve the latency as well. This is an example of what it looked like with Codec Avatars 2.0. And then with these new ones with Gaussian splats, you can see there's another level of detail. Now, individual hair strands can be resolved as well. And you can see this inside of the geometry particularly. There's another level of detail that we can capture. Here's an example of using one of these to relight it as well. And you can see even the environment is reflected in the glint of our eyes now. You can see some of that detail for the first time. And now, of course, we can relight these avatars to occupy whatever environment we wish for them to be. I'll show you a result with full bodies when you don't do this relighting, which we haven't done so far. The person doesn't sit in the environment until these sorts of relighting techniques are used on them. And of course, we're able to show this in real time too. So this is in VR. See this on the screen. Here you see the lights changing around. So far I've spoken mainly about the head. Obviously, a lot of communication happens with your body. This is well understood. There's a famous paper in 1963 by Robert Mehrabian that said that 2/3 of emotional communication is actually not transmitted by your face, but by your body, right? Like what you infer about the emotional state of the person you're speaking to. So we wanted to move down to the torso and the rest of the body as well. And this is a form of distortion reduction too. So we start with the hair. So hair is a very important part of the person's identity, or so I'm told. And in this case, we are able to reconstruct strand-accurate reconstructions of the hair. And the intent of the hair is for people to feel like this is them. This is their head. This is how they move. And we've started to incorporate some of these models in as well. The second is hands. Hands are notoriously difficult because they obviously are very articulate, and we move them. And if I were to ask all of you to just think about where your hands are right now, chances are they're not here. You're either touching your face, you're putting your hands through your hair, you're resting them on some part of your body. They're always in contact. They're always, in some sort of challenging, deformable place. So we were looking at seeing how well we could track it. I think this is probably one of the more accurate hand tracking systems. Contact is difficult, particularly. And then finally, for the full bodies, this is another capture system called the Sochopticon. This has a few more cameras, and with this system, we were able to produce a full body codec avatar. So this is my own from a couple of years ago.
Look up, look down. It can express facial expressions, and also subtle movements of the body, like hand movements. As well as challenging body poses, which involve self-contact that we do all the time when we're interacting with other people. Now,
so you'll notice that this is actually a fully realized avatar. You'll notice in many body reconstruction papers that you see, a lot of the movement looks like this. It's sort of moving around. Really, the field will move forward when we can actually get self-contact, not from the setting that you're seeing over here, which is many, many cameras, but from fewer cameras than this. And then finally, to actually get illumination, this is the system we built most recently. This is a real sort of like monster. This has 1,024 individually controllable lights, each of them spotlight strength, and 512 high-resolution 24 megapixel cameras. It produces like petabytes of data every few minutes, so it's a huge, huge system. And this is what it can capture and why we want it. So you see details on the hair and the face. being simultaneously captured for the very first time with the rest of the body as well, and all of it in focus and in detail. Why do we do this? So in Mugsy, we can capture a lot of good detail about the person's face. In Sociopticon, we could capture the full body. When you zoom in, you see there's detail on Mugsy which doesn't exist in Sociopticon. And what Lighticon does is allow us to have all of that detail. And this is, of course, what the system looks like. It's good to see this actually inside of an environment. Right? So now this is using Gaussian splats for the environment, and the avatar is in this space too. This is what I was saying, that she's not relit yet. And you can see, even though it looks realistic, she's not quite sitting in the environment yet. And this is, of course, an offline image. There's still work to be done to do this in it, and right. I spoke very briefly, and I won't talk much about spatial audio, but we've been also looking at reconstructing the audio field around the avatar as well. So this is a system called Yaser, and these ears actually have microphones in them all over the environment. And what we're able to do with this system is actually reproduce what the audio field is, or the sound field is around the person. Why is this important? This means that if we're able to produce this, no matter where you are, you'll hear the sound as if it's emanating. And most people have not really experienced spatial audio at its highest fidelity. If you ever get the opportunity to do it, it's really like a surprising experience, how much realism there is that you can extract from true spatial audio. Now, of course, most of you are probably thinking that's all very good, but how are you going to get people to scan themselves with these sorts of machines? How many can there be? How economical is it to build it? And what do we really expect people to do? And of course, the challenge is that there is a lot of diversity in how people appear. I'm going to play a video of several people that we've captured inside of our drones. And I'd just like you to look at, study, which I'm sure many of us have done, at the diversity of people, like how they look. Everyone has two eyes, a nose, a mouth, but look at the eyes. How much slight variation there is. Eyebrows, the nose, the mouth, hair, the face shape, skin. Right? These are very subtle differences, but they encode the identity of the person in a very sort of deep way. And then what about facial expressions? These are all different facial expressions, but everyone smiles slightly differently. Everyone sort of glares slightly differently. And you extract a lot of information from the people who you know. You know what that smirk means from your partner. You know what the smile means from your friend. Right? These are things which we extract a lot of information from. Body shape is another major source of variation too. And then clothing. Right? These are pictures from my daughter over the course of 1 year. Lots of different appearances there too. So the challenge is, how do we build the system with an understanding of the variation of human diversity too? And so doing captures that span this diversity, we're able to build universal models that can actually understand how people look as well as how they move. So this is an example of identities changing with a model that understands the commonality between people as well. So there's a universal code of behavior that spans across all of these identities. And using this, what we want to get out is something which produces a high-quality codec avatar of you from a simple phone scan itself. So all you do is scan yourself with the phone in the neutral pose, and then you do the same thing with a few facial expressions, and you end up with an avatar of your face. And this one is fully drivable too. And as a core future direction, what we're looking at is seeing if we can extend this to the body as well. So, in the future, to make this real, there are a couple of axes we still need to work on. The first is trust. Obviously, there is nothing more personal than the way you look, sound, and appear, right? This is your identity, and it's very important that it be ironclad in this space. Because if people don't trust that, nobody's going to use it, and it's not going to be effective. The other is efficiency. These are heavy computational models. And if it requires multiple GPUs to run, it's not going to work out. If it induces latency, it interferes with the communication, it won't work out either. Then complete this. You need to make sure that it's not just your face and hands, but it's your full body. And it's not just one person, it is your social group as well. And then finally, scale. It has to work for everyone. It has to work for everyone who chooses to use the system. And if it degrades at the tails of human diversity, that will affect our effective using it. So I'll end with this report that came out last year from the US Surgeon General. He pointed out the epidemic of loneliness that's pervading society. And in it he said that 1 in 2 Americans will be affected in their lifetimes with loneliness. And it's not in some sort of a small sense. There's a 29% increase in heart disease, 32% increase in strokes, 50% increase in dementia, like a real sort of an impact in people's lives. There is a minister of loneliness I found recently that the UK has, Japan has, so this is something of a worldwide phenomenon. And the thought that struck me was that we've never been more connected as a species as we are at this moment in time, right? We have phones in everyone's pockets, we have internet, we have all sorts of means of connecting with one another. And for some reason, at this particular moment in time when we're more connected than ever before, this is the time when this epidemic of loneliness has occurred. Why is that? Like, how can that be, right? How can that be? And my sense is it's because even though we are connected, we're connected in a way that's not actually respectful of how we've evolved to connect with one another. And that's why there is these limitations exist. When many people think about VR and AR, they think of it as yet another technology in a line of technologies that will separate us from one another. And I feel like this is profoundly mistaken. The opportunity here is to connect us in a way that we've never seen before. And not just to make interactions indistinguishable from real interactions. But I think the real sort of like promise is to go even beyond that. For the very first time, we will have the behavior of a person and the people they're interacting with completely digitized. Everything your face does, everything your body does, everything you say will be digitized. And we can bring the power of computation to bear on those interactions to make them even better than what real interactions are like. And one of the reasons why I was excited to speak in front of you all is that is what all of you do. All of you think about ways in which technologies can make it easier to interact and interface with one another and with the world itself. And I think with that, the possibilities are things I'll be very excited to hear. So thank you for your time. I'm happy to take a few questions.
So we will take a few questions for Yaser before we go back to socializing. The SVs will run out with a microphone to you, wade through. Who has a burning question?
Google. So towards this vision, there's, broadly speaking, there's a kind of uncanny valley towards the ultimate. And the question seems to be, for different either tasks or applications, where that uncanny valley finishes. Specifically, in your first demo, somehow I felt Lex Freeman has that valley floor, and it's really on the other side now. But I don't feel that's true to Mark Zuckerberg. Is that just me, or?
Actually, curiously, the comment we got quite frequently was that this is clearly fake because Mark does not express that much.
That's why he's there.
So I'll say, the real challenge is you have to know the person you're talking to. And maybe joking aside, when you know the person, you can tell whether they're actually expressing the way they should or they shouldn't. It's also very different when you see something on the screen versus when you see it inside the lens. I'll say where the state of the art is right now is when we stand people inside of our capture systems, it clearly crosses the uncanny valley. Like you can have conversations where you forget you're actually in the space talking to it. Like you can do this and it happens very quickly, particularly when there's more than one person. But with the instant scans, the ones which you do from the phone, I think that sort of teeters between the two. So I think one of the challenges is how do we get that across the uncanny valley for phone scans. And the other part, which isn't of course captured in the demos, is your body. You might be surprised how much you recognize about your body, and you only realize that about your hands and your body once you see that you're someone else. So it's certainly like work to be done, but in studios I think we've crossed it, and in real time we've crossed it.
Thank you.
Good evening. So, the avatars today, commercially available, remind me of Toy Story, 1996. You know, and Pixar have moved on a lot since then. What do you think is the timescale for commercially available avatars as you've presented today?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the challenge in this one is there is some research to be done between where we are and where we need to get to. And so, like, rather than think about it in terms of years, I would say it's better to think about it in terms of how many breakthroughs you need. And I would say, like, my estimate is we need about 4 so far. At the beginning of the venture, I would say about 10 or 15, but now I'd say it's down to about 4. So how long does that take? Is it going to be a couple of years? Is it going to be a decade? It's hard to tell because some of this, as you will all very much appreciate, breakthroughs are not predictable. Yeah. There's a gentleman at the back who's been raising their hand for a while, so maybe it's...
Hello, thank you for the, thank you for the very interesting talk. My name is Yutan from the University of Tokyo. So you've presented how, photorealistic, visualization and things like that are very important for connection. But I also think that, one of the key points of connecting with people is not only at how they look or how they sound, is also how they feel. So, for example, warmth is one thing. So are you exploring different ways of sensing other people?
So you mean in terms of like literal warmth? You don't mean metaphorically, right?
Yeah.
So that's difficult for sure because I don't think it's really a question of sensing. It's more a question of rendering. Right? Like how would you render warmth? How would you render touch? How would you render smell? I would say these are all important elements. Can you hug a person? Can you shake their hand? These are also core elements of interaction. I don't think they're in the horizon, near-term horizon. And by near-term horizon, I mean the next 10 years. Visual and auditory is the domain which we can get to in the near term. That's where we're focusing.
Thank you.
Hi, Daisy Kim from Princeton University. So, awesome talk. You mentioned loneliness as one of the issues that this technology could solve. But psychologically and philosophically speaking, isn't loneliness more of an issue of human connection at a sociological, psychological level? So for instance, you could be in a room full of people, but you could feel lonelier than a person with just one other person. What are your thoughts on the benefits of this technology outside of just the kind of technological impressiveness of the, that kind of value, I guess?
I think it's a great question, and I won't pretend to have an understanding of the psychological or sociological sort of aspects of it. But a note I'll make is that this is what sociologists say too. Proximity determines relationships. In other words, you have relationships with people you meet on a regular basis. It doesn't mean that everyone you meet regularly is someone you have a meaningful relationship with, but it's very difficult to have and maintain a relationship unless you meet with them regularly and interact with them regularly. And I'm sure this is something all of us have experienced, right? You move to a new city, your friends or family that you leave behind, you have a relationship with them, but over time, slowly it degrades. I think the opportunity over here is for you to be able to choose who you have who you spend time with, irrespective of where they are in the world. Now, is that sufficient for relationships? I don't think so. But is it necessary for them? I suspect that is the case.
Maybe one more. Go for it. Last question.
Sorry, suddenly a lot of pressure on me, I feel. Yeah, Leslie from Carnegie Mellon, thank you for your talk. I'm curious about this idea of intimacy. I have been looking religiously into VR chat as a form of, building connection in avatars that may not really resemble you one-to-one. And I'm curious about the kind of implications of capturing all this resolution and fidelity about a person, and maybe also perhaps kind of bringing in IRL biases that are tied to physical appearance into the digital realm, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll just say it is a very poorly understood, and I expect to be a very rich area of research. I mean, in the experiences we've had so far, it's very clear that there is something different about this, about the experience of talking to somebody else in this sort of three-dimensional space. Just as an example, without sort of asking for it. We've done this thing where we have a person speak to someone they haven't met before, remotely as their codec avatar. And then after that, once they've done it, they've experienced the technology, we walk them to the other room and expose them to the real person. The person walks out and says, hey, hi, this is how I actually look. And there is a thing people keep saying again and again. It's that I feel like I've actually met you in a way that I don't feel like when I've just had a relationship or a conversation with someone over VC. You say, oh, this person is taller than I expected, or you feel the need to reintroduce yourself. They said there's something different about that when you meet. I feel like I've met you before. There's the repeatability of it makes me feel like there's a phenomenon here that deserves further research. The other question you asked about, how does it affect your sense of self and your sense of a self-image? There are ways, obviously, with this technology where you can drive someone else who's a completely different identity. And I'll tell you, it is a little bit sort of it shifts or disturbs you in some sort of deep way. Your mouth is, you move and you see somebody else's mouth move, their face move, their eyes move. There's something about it which, disturb is a negative word, but it sort of shifts you in some sort of a way. So there's a lot of care to be made in terms of preserving people's identity, but there is also a lot of power here in terms of letting people choose what their self-image is, how they want to present themselves to the world. And the balance between that is an unexplored and very important problem that we have to resolve for this technology to be successful.
Okay, let's thank Yaser for that. Awesome.